Okay, before I even start this video, or before I even start talking, you need to know that even though I still like this movie, it totally fails in comparison to Spider-Man 1 and 2. Spider-Man 1 is a genuinely good movie, and Spider-Man 2 is one of my favorite superhero movies ever made. Spider-Man 3 is kind of in the middle. It's a good movie with problems, but it definitely fails if you're comparing it to the other two movies. Got it? Good. Okay, don't hate on me. Hi, I'm Jacob Suggs, and welcome back to another video. Now, it's no secret that Spider-Man 3 is everybody's favorite comic book movie. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't resist the joke. It was just there in front of me, and I took it. That being said, Spider-Man 3 gets a ton of hate from a lot of people. It's known as one of the worst comic book films around. It's just known for being not very good and very disappointing. The other night, my friend Philip was at my house, and Philip and I were looking for a movie to watch, and we actually turned on Spider-Man 3 and started to watch it. I don't know why, just kinda happened. And it totally hit me. I had an epiphany. Spider-Man 3 is not as bad as everybody says that it is. It's definitely not a great movie, it's got a ton of problems, but it's far from being a bad movie. Okay, this is just my opinion, but in my personal thoughts, I think that people are so used to hating on this movie and pointing their fingers out at, like, you know, the really bad stuff in the movie, that we're actually forgetting that Spider-Man 3 gave us some pretty awesome stuff and definitely has a lot of good moments in it as well. Spider-Man 3, I think, is a disappointing film, but it definitely isn't an awful film. I actually remember seeing Spider-Man 3 in the theater in 2007 with my mom and dad. They actually signed me out of school whenever I was a kid to go watch it. I mean, I have the coolest parents ever. And I really liked it as a kid, but as I've grown up, I've gone to recognize that the film has problems and issues, but not enough to where I flat out hate this movie. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but what you need to know right now is that I think the first two acts of Spider-Man 3 are really solid. That being said though, the third act completely derails, or derails a little bit at least. So let's talk about the good! Tobey Maguire is honestly my favorite Spider-Man, and he still remains that in this film. I think that Peter Parker is just as compelling as he was in the other two, and frankly, I'm still invested with his character and want to know what's going to happen to him in his life. The movie definitely plays on those themes that Spider-Man 2 set up, in that Peter Parker is having a hard time balancing out the Spider-Man aspect of his life and the Peter Parker aspect of his life, you know, together. And in that process of being Spider-Man and Peter Parker, he's also trying to succeed at college, you know, work a job, and also have a relationship with Mary Jane. The world loves Spider-Man, but it doesn't love Peter Parker. And I think that theme established in Spider-Man 2 carries over to Spider-Man 3 very, very well, because it helps increase some of the stakes that happen along the film. And not only do I think that Peter Parker is a captivating character, but I actually feel like Mary Jane is an even stronger character in this movie. Because Mary Jane, Spider-Man 3 is a depressing movie, okay? Because Mary Jane is struggling with being an actress and being a girlfriend and all of this. She just has a lot on her plate as well. And if I had to sum up Spider-Man 3 in just one word, it'd be sad. This movie is so somber, and it has a really, really depressing ending that was obviously meant to continue into a next installment, which never happened, unfortunately. I would have liked to see Spider-Man 4. Not gonna happen. We get two mediocre films instead. But I like dark tones and stuff in movies, so frankly, whenever I see something like that, it really, you know, puts a lot on our characters and on our side characters and on the plot. And I think that's how sequels should be. They need to increase the stakes. Let's talk about Harry Osborn. Harry Osborn, okay, James Franco in these movies was always slightly cringy, yet he always came off as compelling to me as a character with Harry and Spider-Man and all that. Some moments in this movie just don't add up for Harry Osborn, like whenever Peter's at the diner with him and then Peter looks back and Harry is gone once the car zooms by. Classic movie trope, but it doesn't work for Harry Osborn because he can't do that. But I think the idea of Harry hurting his head in the midst of a fight and losing his memory and kind of rekindling his friendship with both Mary Jane and Peter, that's a really interesting concept for a third installment. I just really like the idea of Harry going from "I hate your guts" to "Hey, I like you. For some reason, I don't know what happened, but we're still friends, right?" That's just really interesting to me, and I wish there was more of that in the film, but unfortunately it's bogged down by Venom and Sandman, which I'll get into a little bit later. Now, Flint Marko is a very interesting character in my opinion. I really like the idea that Spider-Man killed the wrong person who didn't shoot Uncle Ben in the first movie, and instead now he has to deal with the fact that he did that, all while trying to find and take out the man who did kill Uncle Ben. Because that brings us back to Spider-Man's "with great power comes great responsibility" quote, which kind of goes full circle in this movie. I also like the idea of Flint Marko being this convict that just wants the best for his daughter, but he's trying to do the best in means that aren't necessarily legal. And I think that's what makes an interesting villain. But when he becomes Sandman, he's just kind of generic movie, bland, uninteresting character. He's one-dimensional. And yeah, some of the fight scenes with Sandman are awesome, I can't deny that. That one in the truck is really great. And that moment whenever he becomes Sandman and is trying to reach to grab the locket, that whole sequence is fantastic and honestly incredible. But for the most part, nothing stands out to me about Sandman. I mean, I get more out of his character, but it's just kind of like the studio was like, hey, we need this guy to be Sandman. Just give him powers, make him Sandman. You know, just add in that character stuff too. And that doesn't always work. I think it would have been way more interesting to have a normal human as your main kind of side antagonist, and had Harry been the main antagonist of Spider-Man 3. But nope, we get 3 villains instead, which was a really bad call because it makes your film really cluttered. And I really like the complexity behind Peter Parker in the black suit, and I like the idea of it not just changing Spider-Man, but it also alters Peter Parker's character, therefore making him a more interesting character because he's acting in ways that we haven't expected him to before. And say what you will about that stupid scene where he's snapping and dancing on the side of New York, but I always laugh at it, I'm sorry. I know it's not funny and it's more cringe than funny, but I can't deny that it gives me a chuckle every time. And that kind of brings me into the bad parts of this movie that I think do deserve that tough criticism that they get. If this movie, and I'll say it again, if this movie would have had Peter Parker in the black suit, Harry as the main villain, and Flint Marko as a side antagonist, the movie would have been so much better and much more well balanced. And you could have more emotional moments between Harry and Peter since he's the main villain. It would make sense because there's already an emotional tie between them, and that's a broken friendship. Unfortunately, the main villain isn't either of these characters, it's Venom. I say Venom because this isn't Venom. This is a studio exec saying, you need to put this in your movie, Sam Raimi, or else we're gonna get really mad. The fans really want to see Venom, so put Venom in the movie. That's why Venom's in this movie. Eddie Brock, I'm sorry, he just doesn't work for me. Nor does Gwen Stacy. I mean, I get why they're in the movie, but they should not be in this movie. And I already think that it was a little bit too late to introduce Gwen Stacy in the picture, because then you can't have those crucial Spider-Man moments that are unfortunately crapped on in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But Eddie Brock, he's completely unlikable, which I totally get what you're going for, but there's a difference between villains that are unlikable and likably unlikable. A good villain is a villain that we love to hate, like the Governor from The Walking Dead is the prime example in my head right now. But a villain that's just unlikable and his only motivation really is that I hate you but I like my powers, that's uninteresting, dull, and flat. And so Venom and Topher Grace's interpretation of Eddie Brock, not good at all. And I know some people are on the fence about the ending of this movie, but I actually really like the ending to this movie. I thought it was a fitting end for Harry's character and for, I guess this trilogy. It's a very sad ending, but every Spider-Man movie has a sad ending. I mean, Spider-Man 1 ends in a funeral, Spider-Man 2 ends in a funeral, Spider-Man 3 ends in sorrow. Yet there's also a sense of hope and inspiration within that sorrow, and I think Spider-Man 3 has that too. And I think that the first 2 acts of this movie are just so good. But the third act is just a really awkward, doesn't really make sense in context action scene that just derails the film. We don't need to have Sandman grow 40 stories just to be in a fight scene. I mean, that... really? And we definitely don't need to shoehorn Venom in just for a fight scene. If you're going to put that in a movie, put it in with purpose, because action without purpose is just meaningless action. So do I think this movie sucks and deserves all of the hate that it gets? Absolutely not. I think there's a lot of good stuff in Spider-Man 3, but Spider-Man 3 is an ultimately disappointing movie. If you watch all of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films in a row and just marathon it, I still think that you're gonna have a fun time. Spider-Man 3 isn't unwatchable. It's a perfectly watchable film, and it's an okay to good movie, but it's definitely got a lot of problems that hold it back. I don't know why I wanted to talk about this. I guess watching it the other night with Philip just really got me thinking about the movie, and I gotta say, I don't hate Spider-Man 3. There's good stuff in the movie. And you could argue, well, yeah, it's got more cons than pros, though, and I can get that, and I can kind of get behind the fact that most of the pros are from stuff that's carried over from the other two movies. But overall, I gotta say, I think this movie works in a crazy sense. Take out the third act and, just get rid of some stuff, and I think you could have a solid flick. That being said, though, what do you guys think of Spider-Man 3? Do you think it deserves all of the hate that it gets? Let me know down in the comments below. And if there's anything that stood out to you about this film that I didn't touch on, or that you just didn't like in general that I didn't touch on, let me know about that in the comments below too, and I'll probably talk to you guys about Spider-Man in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Frame by Frame. Remember the name. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next Frame by Frame film review. Bye, guys.